In this video, we'll be taking a look at my updated 2024 election map prediction exactly 2 weeks from the election. There has been some crazy new changes in the polls, as we can see in these new polling averages where Trump and Harris are tied in 5 of the 7 key battleground states. Before we get started, please subscribe to my channel for more election content and more election predictions, as well as real-time updates on major events leading up to the 2024 election. Follow my Twitter linked in the description below for daily updates. Today, we will start on the West Coast, where Kamala Harris will easily win the states of Washington, Oregon, and California, all states that Biden carried by over 15% in 2020. She will also win the states of Illinois, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine's 1st District, Maryland, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. For Donald Trump, he will likely win the states of Alaska, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. With the solid states filled out for both candidates, Kamala Harris stands at 167 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 139 electoral votes. We will now be moving on to the likely states for each candidate, starting with Minnesota for Kamala Harris. This comes at no surprise, as Tim Walz is the incumbent governor of Minnesota, which will give Kamala Harris a boost in not only Minnesota, but in the entire Midwest. Next up, the states of Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Maine at large, and the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska will go to Kamala Harris by a likely margin. For Trump, the states of Iowa and Texas will go to him by a likely margin. Trump won both of these states in both 2016 and in 2020, and Trump is actually on track to have his worst performance yet in Iowa. However, the states of Iowa and Texas are just no longer competitive, and Donald Trump will carry them by a likely margin. With the likely states, Kamala Harris stands at 226 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 188 electoral votes. We will now be moving on to the lean states for each candidate. These are states that candidates are expected to win by around 2 to 7% in margin on election night. Due to this being an extremely competitive election, there will be very few lean states on this map. There will be no lean states for Kamala Harris, but for Donald Trump, he will win the states of Florida and Maine's 2nd Congressional District by a lean margin in this election. This brings his total up to 219 electoral votes as we enter into the final key battleground states that will decide this election. Taking a look at the polls, we see that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are tied in 4 out of these 7 key battleground states. However, as of recently, Republican-favored pollsters have been flooding the averages, making it very biased towards Donald Trump. A recently conducted study shows that out of the 30 most recent polls, 17 of them have been partisan Republican-favored polls compared to the 15 nonpartisan polls and the 2 Democrat-favored polls. This has hugely affected the polling averages, making them significantly favor Trump even though he is not exactly doing that well. We will start by taking a look at the state of Nevada. Taking a look at the polling averages in Nevada, we see that Kamala Harris leads by 0.3%. This is one of the states where the Republican-biased pollsters have significantly shifted the averages in favor of Trump. In 2020, Biden won Nevada by 2.4%, and I just don't think that this country has shifted by a whole 2 points, especially after many major events that Donald Trump caused, such as the January 6th incident, as well as many other major scandals associated with him and his campaign. Because of that, I will be giving Nevada to Kamala Harris by a very slight margin. Moving on to the state of Arizona. Now, Arizona is a different story from Nevada, as Joe Biden only carried it by 0.3%. In 2020, Biden was more popular than Kamala Harris is as of now. However, Donald Trump is also less popular than he was 4 years ago. Even with the popularity changes, Arizona still remains a crucial toss-up state. However, Donald Trump is slightly favored to win it because Biden was only able to carry it by 0.3% and only by a few thousand votes, which is extremely close for an election where Biden was expected to win by a landslide. Because of that, I will be giving Arizona and its 11 electoral votes to Donald Trump. Let's move on to the Rust Belt, where the three states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are crucial to both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Let's take a look at the state of Michigan. Taking a look at the polls in Michigan, we see that Kamala Harris leads by 0.2%. This is another state where the Republican-favored pollsters have flooded these averages, and Donald Trump is not actually performing that well. Out of all of the Rust Belt states, Michigan went to Biden by the largest margin in 2020, and he carried the state by 2.8%, which is significant for a battleground state like Michigan. Speaking from a demographic perspective, the Rust Belt is primarily made up of white voters, which tend to favor Kamala Harris even more than they did Biden in 2020. Many factors contribute, but Michigan will go to Kamala Harris by a very slight margin in this election. We will now be moving on to the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, which is also the most important state in this election, where both candidates have spent the majority of their time and resources on the state. Back in 2020, Biden won the state of Pennsylvania by 1.2%, which was a decently large margin, unlike Wisconsin. Even though this race has tightened up, I don't think that Donald Trump has shifted Pennsylvania by a whole 1.2% than where he was 4 years ago, especially because not only has Kamala Harris gained popularity after announcing her presidency, but Donald Trump has also lost popularity amongst many of these educated white voters. Both from a number standpoint and from a demographic standpoint, Kamala Harris is favored to win Pennsylvania. Ultimately, this state will come down to the wire, but I will be giving Pennsylvania to Kamala Harris by a very, very slight margin. Moving on to the state of Wisconsin. Back in 2020, Biden carried the state of Wisconsin by the slightest margin out of the three Rust Belt states, and Wisconsin is also probably the most conservative one out of the three. In 2020, Biden won Wisconsin by 0.6%, which is a very, very slight margin. In all of my past electoral predictions, I've always given Wisconsin to Kamala Harris. However, this is a shocker. I believe that Donald Trump will flip the state of Wisconsin in the 2024 election. This is because I believe that 0.6% is a slight enough margin for it to be overturned, especially as Harris is not performing as well in Wisconsin as she is in Michigan and Pennsylvania. However, this in no way means that Harris won't win this election, as we have many more shockers to come in these other key battleground states. With 2 states to go, Kamala Harris stands at 266 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 240 electoral votes. Let's start by taking a look at the state of North Carolina. For some historical context, North Carolina has been a pretty conservative state in the past, voting for Obama in 2008, but for a Republican candidate ever since that. However, this election, I believe, is when things will change. Hurricane Helene has devastated western North Carolina, where many of the conservative Republican voters live. The Biden and Harris administration has also played a critical role in recovery from this hurricane, which will boost their chances in the West. Not only that, but there have also been many scandals in the North Carolina Republican Party, all somewhat related to Donald Trump. One of these scandals would involve Mark Robinson and some extreme comments he made on various pornographic sites across the internet. Not only that, but North Carolina has been seemingly shifting to the left. According to Atlas Intel, the most accurate predictor of the 2020 election, Kamala Harris is leading by a very slight margin in North Carolina, with their new polls showing her up by 2 and 3. Harris has also invested a lot of time and money in North Carolina, way more than any Democrat has in the past. Even with its conservative past, I believe that this election will be the election where North Carolina will flip for the first time since Obama in 2008. And with North Carolina, Kamala Harris has passed the 270 electoral count threshold required to become the next president of the United States of America. We will now be taking a look at our final state, the state of Georgia, which was also the closest state in the 2020 election. In 2020, the Democrats not only had a historic flip in Georgia, but they also swept the Senate, with Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff flipping the 2 Senate seats on Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. However, since then, things for Democrats haven't been looking as well in Georgia, as Donald Trump has retaken the lead in the polls. Overall, Georgia could go either way, but as of now, Donald Trump does seem to be slightly favored to win the state of Georgia. Because of these factors, I will be giving Georgia to Donald Trump by a very slight margin, which makes the final electoral count 282 for Kamala Harris to 256 for Donald Trump. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys made it here, please subscribe to my channel for more content like this leading up to the 2024 election.